Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
I would describe myself as a seeker after truth, and more specifically, the truth about the big picture. What is the widest context in which human life is played? And I'm not talking about astrophysics, which deals with the quantitative, but I'm talking about the more qualitatively. So I would like to understand who we humans are, and most specifically, as part of the human race, who I am, and second, I would like to understand, I'm a seeker after the truth as to how I can best live this miracle of human life that has been accorded me. That's my self-description.
Well, what I'm looking at is the value of, and experience of empathy.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could go through your life story of how you became aware of empathy and anything you learned about empathy, perhaps starting even in your childhood to the present, kind of the arc of your life, and how has your view and insight into the nature of empathy developed?
Yes. If it's legal for me to ask you, for me, empathy is at the heart of the phenomenon of love. Do you distinguish between empathy and love?
I see empathy as maybe a first step.
First step.
Yeah, it's the first step of connecting, and then maybe a going deeper. And at some point, maybe love happens. It's such a deep form of empathy.
Good, good. Well, we humans are empathetic creatures. There was in England a researcher. He spent his Ian Sati by name researching infants, and unfortunately his life was cut off at 40, so it's truncated, but nevertheless he had a decade, and he would film infants at the moment of their birth on. And what he found was that Freud was wrong. Freud contended that the deepest ingredients in human life were sex and aggression. Ian Sati, with his hours of film, found that that is wrong. The first and deepest need of a human being, an infant, is bonding, looking out, and as if, is there any human being that I can bond with, of course not putting that into words, and gazing into its mother's adoring eyes, and that incursion of her adoration brings a response to the mother. And this becomes more and more visible as the days and the early weeks pass, and before maybe in the third week or something, when the baby is suckling at the mother's breast and looking at her adoring eyes, why, the baby will drop the nipple and have the rudiments of a smile there. Now, in that earliest stage of life, I see empathy at work both ways, because in order for there to be a relationship, there has to be two parties. And the empathetic relationship is encouraging this relationship on both sides. Now, that's a long and maybe a little, no, you're giving me permission, but your question was my experience. I too was an infant, and I experienced that loving gaze, and so I'm going to go so far as to say that empathy is the wellspring of human life. Now, tragically, like wells and springs, they can get clogged, and that is sad to the point of being truly tragic. But in a normal, healthy life, why, that just splays out into the empathy with other people. And toddlers and on up to 3 and 4, they know that, I'm assuming just a normal, healthy family, that empathy is at their arm's reach, in that if they fall down and hurt themselves, there will be someone, a mother or someone, that will empathize with their sorrow and will come and pick the child up and go to a chair, and the tears will quickly dry and be replaced by a smile. Now, all of that I experienced in my childhood, which you may know that my parents were missionaries in China, and so I grew up there. And my father dedicated his life to taking Christianity to the Chinese, and my mother's vocation was a piano teacher. And in our house, she wanted to teach the young women to play the piano to accompany the singing of hymns in the church. So every day there would be about 5 music lessons there. Now, the reason I'm bringing that is that my mother was, as well as my father, my mother was also a professional woman. And she consigned me during the working period of the day to, we would call a nanny or an ama. And so I was in my ama's arms when I was an infant for the most part of the day. And there was the same kind of adoring and empathetic relationship in that context as well. And then as I grew older, I'm just giving the personal story for what is pretty universal, friendships. And so important in life. And when my wife Kendra was interviewing people who had overcome difficulties in their lives and triumphed over it, and I remember she reporting to me one of the questions to one of the women and said, well, when you went to school, was that traumatic, leaving the home unknown? Oh no, more kids to know. Well, in those friendships, they are built on empathy because they are relationships and they require subject and object, and you can't have a working relationship if either party did not know where the other member was, to use a stock phrase overused today, where they were coming from. And so, as our lives expand into wider circuits, throughout, empathy powers our life. Now, one has to be cautious in one sense here, and say, and what I have said, I stand by as in a normal, healthy development. And when there is not this empathic relationship between two people, something sours and a friendship develops and a split usually occurs. From my standpoint, the apex of this is, I'm speaking for myself, marriage, which is the bedrock of my life. And I've been very fortunate in having a partner where, well, I'll put it graphically. A daughter of ours was in Germany, and a friend took her to see a psychic. And the psychic said, first thing before my daughter or her friend said a word, said, "Your parents love each other." That was the opening word. And Gail, our daughter, so? Implying, well, sure, that's no. He said, no, you will be surprised at how rare that is. Now, I'm not going to stand on the psychic powers of the guy. I do say, believe that some people do have psychic powers of insight, but whether this guy had it or not, I don't know. But I will come back that the bedrock of our relationship is the capacity to empathize and recognize and validate the feelings of the other. Now, I don't want to romanticize this. Every marriage has its ups and downs, and ours is certainly typical of that. But we have worked on it, and when we get into a glitch, why, I'm going to generalize because I think this is virtually universal, all with negligible exceptions, that there was a misunderstanding. And the misunderstanding blocked the capacity of each of us to empathize with the feelings of the others. I did not realize the pain that I was causing her in what I did or said. And that means when I say didn't realize, that means I did not empathize with her feelings. The word didn't occur to me, and I'm not sure that I would have understood what it was, but the phenomenon was there because playmates to get along have to relate. One has to know what one is relating to. And this knowledge of the other includes the capacity to recognize the feelings of others. and that's a roundabout way to speak of empathy. Now, the feelings, friendships and playmates, mostly, for the most part, happy and good, but of course glitches always arise. And I am hazarding that these glitches and problems in relationship the spring out, bubble forth from a sort which is purely self-centered and does not recognize and acknowledge the feeling of the other party in the relationship.
Were you very empathetic already as a child, or is that something that kind of developed?
Well, this leads into a rather embarrassing answer, because I sort of wince when I say it. I was the favorite child of my parents. I really sigh, but the fact is that I was, and I am very sure that I sought and cultivated that special relationship. Now, that is a confession, and as we all know, an honest confession is good for the soul. Unfortunately, it's often very bad for the reputation. And it is bad for my reputation, even in my own eyes, that I sought that. But being the favorite child, why this empathic relationship was more palpable in my relation with my child-parent relationship than it might otherwise have been.
You had a very close relationship with them.
Absolutely.
Very close. And
absolutely. And the better part of me wishes that it had been evenly divided. But the fact of the matter is that it wasn't, and I've assumed responsibility, at least half the responsibility, for it not having been equal.
Equal in terms of with your siblings, that they didn't
Exactly.
get equal attention? So
exactly.
So a sense of not fair, kind of maybe a lack of fairness?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
And I live 10 minutes from here, so very close.
Well, I remember you saying that. I'm glad that it didn't inconvenience you too much.
It's great to come back and visit again. So
Good.
I really appreciate your taking the time to.
Well, it's an important subject, and this assignment, knowing it was coming up, has caused me to ponder this subject. And not only ponder it myself, but discuss it with Kendra. I used to say my wife, but now I have learned to say whose husband I am. And she told me when I was telling her about the upcoming interview, she told me a story that concerns one named Sharon Salzberg, who is a teacher now at the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. And when she was training for this post at that facility, she spent a number of months under a teacher in India on meditation. And that teacher indicated that one of the important rewards of meditation is to allow an opportunity for stuff that we have just tamped down because it's not pleasant, and tamped down and thereby avoided dealing with it and even driven it out of our consciousness. But as she was correctly told, if you do not recognize these negative impulses within it and deal with them reflectively, acknowledging them, why then they are sure to come out in unconscious ways that affect your behavior not to the best. Now, to continue the story that Sharon Salz, by the way, I will now lapse into the usual, that my wife spent a number of months at the Insight Meditation Society, and that is where one of her teachers, two teachers, Sharon Salzberg, told this story. For a while, she worked in a hospital, and one morning, a man came in bearing a small infant who could not even walk yet in his arms, and it was battered, and the man, tears flowing, admitted that in a moment of rage he had done the battering. The other nurses were filled with horror and virtually turned their back on him. But Sharon heard the story, and without any condemnation, she told him that about her training for her position, and how in that training they were encouraged to delve within themselves and relax and allow negative impulses that come into them to surface. And in the process of that training, she encountered or there surfaced in her a recognition that of terrible things that she had had impulses to do, but being mature and well put together, but she recognized that they were there, did not deny that they were there. And so she told this to the father of the battered child and said, well, you are weeping, so I know that you regret what you did, but I want you to know that you are not the only one that have had negative impulses to act in horrendous ways towards people that you basically love. And with that story, the man relaxed, wiped his eyes, and they just proceeded with their session. As I say, that story comes from Kendra, and I think it is virtually a paradigm example of a wonderful instance of empathy. The nurse empathized with the father who had battered his child, rather than scolding him, lecturing him, or something else in that vein. The reason that I feel this is virtually a paradigmatic case of empathy is that Sharon Salzberg was able to empathize with the father of the battered child feelings without giving vent to them. Now, if from that concrete example I try to extract a definition of empathy, I find myself coming up with empathy is the capacity to sense another person's feeling as being within oneself. Actions come later, but that is what empathy is. And I've to drive home a basic point, I have begun with a negative feeling, which Sharon, the nurse, was able to feel in herself. Normally, the feelings are, on balance, far more positive than negative. And this leads me to the name of Daniel Goleman, who virtually single-handedly introduced into our vocabulary the phrase emotional intelligence. Long, long, long ago, 100 years or so, the notion of IQ, intellectual intelligence, entered our common knowledge. And schools can rate students on that, and I think the normal is about 130, but some people have IQs, brilliant, maybe Einstein or something like that, that go up to 170. Now, EQ, emotional intelligence, came into our common knowledge only about, well, less than 50 years ago, 40 or 50 years ago. IQ can be measured. EQ cannot be measured. What it is emotional intelligence in a situation. Emotional intelligence can do two things. It can recognize all the factors that enter into the issue of what one should do. And second, it can prioritize. Well, I don't think it's even prioritize. It can put together all the factors that are involved and come out with a sound judgment as to how one should respond. So, let's just take an example, a mundane, ordinary example. One is at a group occasion. Yesterday morning, no, what is this? This is Monday. 2 days ago, it doesn't matter, I was picked up and taken to a lunch by the founder at the home of the founder of the California School of Professional Psychology. And there were, it was a lunch, and there were about 8 people around a large table. Now, that's the setting, and the EQ, the emotional intelligence that was inquired of me was when to speak, what to say, and who to look at. The content doesn't make any difference, but I had to size up the situation, recognize who was present, and then recognize what that context indicated for the action that I would say. I was, so to speak, the guest of honor, and so eyes tended to be on me, and they expected me to speak, and I did speak, but before I spoke, why, I went around and asked each of them, well, what was their connection to this gathering? What was it that gave them a place at the table, so to speak? It's a trivial, ordinary situation, but we can use the everyday situation to indicate what emotional intelligence involves and indicates when I should speak, what I should speak, and taking into account the people who were there and what was in their uppermost in their mind. Now, I think I acquitted myself decently, but it wasn't a demanding situation, and I just cite it as an ordinary example of what emotional intelligence involves. Now, let me see if I can extract from this a definition of compassion, empathy. Empathy is the capacity to experience the feelings of the one you are dealing with as if they were your own. It does not in itself go on to specifics of that, but that is what empathy means. And
it's feeling the other, feeling the emotions.
Feeling what they are feeling. And I will reiterate what I think I said. One does not have to rate them as good or bad. That comes later, because you can rate them or deal with them until you have them.
You need a connection first.
The connection first. And significantly, love involves empathy, but empathy does not entail love. To genuinely love another person, I'll just speak Kendra and myself, why I need to feel her love for me. But that's at one end of the spectrum. And to go back to the example of the battered child, empathy, as Sharon the nurse felt, did not mean to, did not imply approval or wanting to do the same. Love, and I'm talking about not just a one-way, but a mutual love, requires empathy, presupposes empathy, but empathy does not presuppose or require love. Is that distinction clear?
So I've been looking at how do we build a culture of empathy. So how do we create a society that allows more empathy to take place in our society, that creates the social structures that facilitates and supports empathy?
Yes.
How do we create a culture of empathy?
First, let me say you could, dream no little dream. If one could just increase the empathy in our culture, I understand the smallest unit of measurement is a picometer, which is 1,000th of the width of a human hair. If we could raise the empathy in our culture even 1 picometer, it would increase the smiles and the happiness of our culture. But your question was, how do we do that? 2 steps. First, slow down. We are trapped in a culture of speed. I find myself horrified. I don't listen to television anymore. Part of it is because of my deafness, and they speak too fast, so I can't really follow it. But when others are watching television, and except for the channel PBS, or which if we're on those channels that are selling things, I am absolutely appalled, because the images flick so fast. It's just like being under visual machine gun fire going on around you. And of course, the object is to sell things, and that requires the attention, and that requires speed until the principal person comes on and holds up a can of dog food or something like that and makes the pitch from it. Now, we cannot have a compassionate society, or the first step is to just slow down, go slower wherever you go. And the second step is to listen. Listen more than you speak. Doesn't follow you shouldn't speak at all, but speak when you are spoken to or questioned, because people going almost frenetically through their lives or something, they are desperate for listeners. They want to talk and be heard. So insofar as those two things, slowing down and listening to others, are the primary way to raise the level of empathy and compassion in our society.
You had mentioned meditation, so that sounds like one of the ways perhaps of slowing down.
Yes. Yes. You know, the railroads are declining in their importance, but there used to be the slogan, stop, look, and listen at every railroad crossing. And it's not a bad advice for living one's life.
Stop, look, and listen.
Stop, look, and listen.
Did you follow the Obama campaign?
Well, yes, I certainly, I think I have not always been very proud to be an American, but this, I think, is a time for pride. When an Afro-American, the American people can elect him to be their leader. And then, of course, they would not have done that if he did not have traits of character and capacity and effectiveness. And he has all of those. He is facing very, very difficult time. We're in a period, as we're conducting this conversation, of economic decline.
Obama ran on the theme of that we have an empathy deficit in the country.
I had forgotten that.
He mentioned empathy in 60 of his speeches and interviews.
I'm glad to know of that. He mentioned empathy in 60 speeches.
And interviews.
Thank you for telling me that. I'm going to noise that around. It's a wonderful, wonderful index of the man's worth.
That was one of the inspirations for me to do this documentary.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you recognized it and picked up on it. And this is one of the fallouts of that. It's good.
So, in terms of making a culture of empathy, you had mentioned slowing down and listening. Are there actual ways of doing that? That to build a culture of empathy, we actually need social structures, perhaps in the schools, perhaps in work, perhaps in society that support empathy and that facilitate empathy? What are the things that we can do, kind of the actual ways that we can go about changing society to make it more empathic?
Well, I think you put your finger on what is probably the most important, and that is to build recognition of the importance of empathy into our educational system. Now, how one does that, I don't think legislation is the answer, but I think, again, to noise it about and get this topic more into the public conversation. And you certainly are a pioneer in making this your life work.
So are there questions you have about the nature of empathy, something you're curious about exploring?
Well, I think I voiced them. We can, with the reward, we can recognize every day, just bring our minds back to it. Probably, socially speaking, recognizing EQ, emotional intelligence, will get us further than introducing the word empathy. In virtually every context of life, why it would be useful to realize what is the emotionally empathetic input that I can make in this situation.
Looking at it, empathy from a little different point of view, do you have a metaphor for empathy? Like, often empathy is, the definition is they use the metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. Do you have a personal metaphor of how you would describe empathy?
Well, what comes to mind, you sprung that question on me, and I have not directly thought of them. But whether it qualifies or not, I would say that the adage, do unto others as you would that they should do unto you, is a verbal metaphor for empathy.
When I interviewed you last time, you talked about a well or a spring, that it was similar to a well or spring.
Yes. Well, metaphors come and go. And
I like that one. That was a good one.
All right, so, good.
What about the opposite of empathy? What do you see as the opposite?
Selfishness. what's the opposite? Oh, emotional ignorance. Yeah, rather than intelligence. Obtuseness, self-centeredness is a good one. I mean, just to be wrapped up in the cocoon of one's own inflated, noisy ego. That's opposite of empathy.
Do you have a metaphor for ego? What is ego like?
Metaphor for ego.
Or selfishness?
Metaphor for maybe the force in physics that attracts objects to one another.
Gravity?
Gravity would be when the Earth is the strong force in question, but also, as we know, that force is present in small doses throughout the world.
Perhaps magnetism?
Yes, yeah, that's good. Very good, magnetism.
So selfishness is like a magnet.
Is a magnet, yeah.
And you had mentioned empathy was more like a spring or a well.
Yeah, I love the line in Plotinus, that fountain ever on. Last time I used well, now I will use fountain, and gushing forth empathy for all in your environment.
Barack Obama said he would nominate a Supreme Court justice that had empathy. It was one of the criteria.
Good for him.
And he was severely attacked by conservatives saying empathy is bad in the courts.
Yeah.
So what is your feeling about empathy and justice, the relationship of empathy and justice?
Oh, I'm sure that there is a very solid relationship. That if you do not empathize with the victims of injustice, there will be no concrete reason to oppose those forces. So, yes, the underlying spring is very much there as to mix metaphors again, the foundation of justice.
So empathy is a foundation for justice, then, that we need for...
Yeah, it can, to be able to feel the impact of the law in question on all that it will affect. Yes, that's very profound, and I'm shocked that conservatives faulted President Obama on that point.
One of the criticism was that empathy is bias. empathy means bias for one side or the other.
Well, says who? Uh, no, it can be, but when it's firmly and accurately in place, emotional intelligence, it brings into view and recognizes, at least in principle and as far as possible, actually and concretely, the consequences for everybody that the law will set in place.
So true empathy would be empathy for all parties.
Yeah, I go back to the fact that empathy does not mean approval. Sure, I'm going to go so far and say empathy is always in order. It is like enlarging our understanding of the situation in question. It does not give us answers as to how to behave, but it gives us the context in which the answers should be made.
Who is someone that's been very empathic that you've seen?
Yes. I was blessed by a 35-year friendship with Aldous Huxley. And he was remarkable in innumerable ways. An encyclopedic intelligence, just to begin with. When the 14th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica was published, nobody was surprised when the New York Times drafted Aldous Huxley to review the 14th edition of the Encyclopedia. He found it inferior to the 11th edition. That gives one a conception of the breadth of his intelligence. But underneath that, I came to the conclusion that the remarkable thing about Aldous Huxley was not the vastness of intelligence. I'm going to pause on that again for a moment. Swinburne, the musician. Can you latch on? Well, never mind. Prominent musician said having Aldous Huxley on the as a friend was like having the Library of Congress at the other end of the telephone line. One evening, he phoned Aldous and asked him the origin and derivation of the word scissors. Aldous knew it, could just give it to him. Uh, but I, from the 35-year friendship, I concluded that the most important thing about Aldous was that he was such a good man. And in the context of this interview, we could say such an empathic human being.
How did he show his empathy? How did you see that?
Well, in his humility is one thing. I was once, I brought him for a semester as a distinguished visiting professor in the humanities at MIT, and every college in New England wanted him, and so I wanted to spend as much time with him as I could, and so I drove him back to and from his lectures. And on one of the, after he'd given a knockout lecture, he said, as I was driving him home, "Huston, you know, it's a little bit embarrassing to have spent one's whole life pondering the human condition and to come up with nothing more profound by way of advice than just try to be a little kinder." I mean, there is the humility, and would that be called empathy? Well, I feel like I'm on a treadmill of the white mice running these things, coming back to the same thing, but with empathy as the foundational virtue. And we've taken that through emotional intelligence. And I haven't mentioned the word wisdom, but it is clearly implied and maybe the wrap-up word that in living one's life, and to live empathically is to live wisely. The only thing is to commend you on your project. I can't think of anything more important than raising the empathetic quotient of our society, and you're certainly doing your best and as much as anybody I know to accomplish that goal.
I would just be able to shake your hand. I really appreciate kind of sharing your wisdom, because I really feel a great deal of wisdom from all your experience. And
well, we can trace that word wisdom. I mean, there are two things, little statements, both by a 9-year-old, two different 9-year-olds. One of them, a mother tucking her 9-year-old son into bed, saying good night, and then the next morning finding scribbled on by his bed, "Dear God, I'm doing the best I can." Jimmy.
That's great, thank you.
Jimmy. The other adage that I like that came from a 9-year. He was assigned to give a book report, and his book report consisted of one sentence. This book tells me more about penguins than I need to know. I think that's lovely, wonderful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm going to keep exploring empathy, so I appreciate your support, your encouragement.
Well, I certainly, that's very sincere.